It was one of those quiet Friday nights that felt too peaceful to be real. The rain was tapping softly against the living room windows, and the golden light from the lamp made the whole room glow with warmth. Emma sat on the couch with her son, Ryan, a steaming mug of cocoa in her hands. They had started watching a Netflix movie, some light-hearted romantic comedy she had picked to lift the mood after a long week. Ryan had just returned home from college for the weekend, and Emma couldn't hide how happy she was to have him back. He was 22 now, tall, thoughtful, and calm, the kind of young man any mother would be proud of. Yet there was something about him tonight that felt different, a quiet seriousness beneath his usual smile. "Still watching those old-school romance movies, Mom?" he had teased at first, his blue eyes glinting with mischief. Emma laughed softly. "You used to love them when you were younger. Remember how you'd cry at the sad parts?" He rolled his eyes. "That was when I was 10. Now I just observe the stories differently." She smiled. "Oh, really? And what do you observe now?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked at her, really looked, as if seeing something he hadn't noticed before. Emma felt a strange wave of emotion. Maybe it was nostalgia, or maybe just the memory of how fast time had passed. Her little boy wasn't little anymore. The movie played on, two characters on screen falling in love under a city's bright lights. But the real story was happening in that quiet room, between two people who had shared a lifetime of unspoken emotions, laughter, and silent support. Ryan shifted slightly closer on the couch. The warmth from his presence filled the space between them, and Emma suddenly realized how long it had been since anyone had sat that close, not out of necessity, but out of comfort. "Do you ever think," Ryan began, his voice low, "how strange it is that we grow up watching stories about love, but we never really see what it looks like when people stop trying?" Emma blinked, a little caught off guard. "What do you mean?" "I mean, Dad left. You stayed strong. You smiled through everything, Mom. But I wonder." He paused, looking at her with quiet intensity. "Do you ever get lonely?" The question hit her like a soft thunderclap. She looked down at her cocoa, unsure how to answer. It wasn't something she talked about. She'd built her life around strength, around being the person Ryan could always count on. "Sometimes," she admitted finally, her voice steady but fragile. "But that's life. You learn to find happiness in small things." Ryan nodded slowly, his gaze still locked on her. The movie's light flickered across his face, revealing a trace of emotion he didn't hide fast enough. For a moment, silence filled the room, not uncomfortable, but deep. Something in the air shifted, like the world had paused to listen. "Mom," Ryan said suddenly, his voice softer now, "I wish you could see yourself the way I see you. You're amazing. You've done everything alone, and you still smile like it's easy." Emma's heart tightened. "Ryan, you don't have to," he cut her off gently. "I mean it. You've given so much love to everyone else. But you deserve someone who gives it back to you." The words lingered raw, unexpected, and painfully sincere. Emma looked at him, unsure what to say. Her throat felt tight. She hadn't realized until that moment how much she needed to hear those words. Outside, the rain grew heavier, and the sound filled the silence between them. Ryan turned his attention back to the TV, but his mind seemed far away. His jaw tightened slightly, like he was holding something back. Emma studied him quietly, the boy she'd raised, now a man, carrying emotions he couldn't quite name. And that's when he said it. He turned toward her again, his expression open, eyes glistening with something that made her heart skip. "Mom," he said quietly, "you know what's crazy? Sometimes, I wish I could be the one who makes you happy." The room fell utterly still. The sound of the rain, the flicker of the screen, the hum of the heater, all of it faded into a strange, suspended quiet. Emma felt a rush of warmth, confusion, and something she couldn't even name. The sincerity in his tone wasn't childish or careless. It was deep, born from affection, respect, and the kind of emotional closeness that words rarely touched. She didn't speak right away. She couldn't. Ryan looked down, realizing how that might have sounded. "I mean," he stammered softly, "I just hate that you've been alone. You deserve someone good. Someone who actually sees you." Emma smiled faintly, trying to steady her voice. "That's sweet, honey, but you don't have to worry about me." "Really, I do," he whispered, "because I care." The movie ended, but neither of them noticed. The closing credits rolled as they sat in quiet thought, two hearts caught in an invisible pull of love, longing, and the fragile boundary between past and present. Emma reached over and squeezed his hand, a silent gesture of understanding. But deep down, she knew something had shifted that night, and what Ryan said next would change everything. The rain had slowed by morning, leaving the world soft and silver. Sunlight peeked shyly through the curtains, and the smell of coffee filled the kitchen. Emma stood by the counter, staring into her mug, lost in thoughts she hadn't meant to carry into the next day. Ryan's words from last night kept echoing in her mind. Sometimes I wish I could be the one who makes you happy. She had told herself it was just concern, just a son expressing care. But something about his tone, the depth in his eyes had unsettled her in ways she couldn't explain. When Ryan walked in, his hair still tousled from sleep, Emma forced a smile. Morning, sleepyhead. Coffee, he grinned. Please. That movie marathon wore me out. She chuckled softly, grateful for the easy tone. You barely made it halfway through before falling asleep. Ryan rubbed his neck sheepishly. Maybe I just needed that quiet time with you. Her heart skipped just for a moment. He said it so casually, but his gaze lingered a second too long. She turned quickly toward the coffee pot, pretending not to notice. The kitchen was filled with the usual clinks and hums of a peaceful morning, but the air felt heavier somehow, charged with unspoken thoughts. They sat at the small dining table, their plates of toast between them. Ryan spoke about college, his photography class, and a new project about capturing moments that felt like love. That's a beautiful theme, Emma said. What kind of moments are you capturing? Ryan smiled faintly, eyes lowering. Ones that feel real, like someone just breathing beside you after a long day. Not dramatic, not forced, just two people who get each other. She nodded slowly. That kind of love is rare. It is, he agreed. Maybe that's why I notice it more now. Their eyes met briefly, and it felt like time paused again. Emma looked away, her chest tightening with something that wasn't sadness but wasn't comfort either. She remembered how life had once been full of laughter. Dinners with her husband, trips to the lake, shared dreams. But when he left, all of that had quietly dissolved. She'd poured everything into Ryan, her time, her energy, her love, until she forgot what it meant to be seen as a woman, not just a mother. Maybe that was why his words last night had hit her so hard. Later that afternoon, they decided to take a drive to the coast. The sky had cleared, the air crisp with the scent of pine. They drove with the windows slightly open, the soft sound of the wind blending with the radio. Ryan kept glancing at her, smiling like he was trying to memorize the moment. You always look peaceful when you're near the ocean, he said. Emma smiled. The ocean listens without judging. I like that. He laughed quietly. Guess that's why I've always liked being around you. The comment caught her off guard again, playful but sincere. She didn't respond right away, just smiled and looked out toward the horizon. They parked by the cliffs, where the waves crashed far below. For a long time, they just stood there, the sound of the sea filling the silence between them. Ryan took a deep breath and said softly, You know, sometimes I wish time could stop right here. Emma looked at him. Why? Because moments like this? He hesitated, choosing his words carefully. They feel like home. Something stirred in her chest, that aching mixture of love, gratitude, and confusion. She didn't know how to name it, but she felt it deeply. When they returned home that evening, the house felt smaller, quieter. Emma went to her room to fold laundry, but her thoughts kept drifting. Ryan's words, his looks, they carried an emotion she wasn't prepared to face. She sat on the edge of her bed, holding one of his old shirts from when he was younger. So many years had passed, yet some part of her still saw him as that little boy who ran to her when thunder scared him. And now, he was a man, one who spoke to her with a gentleness that stirred long-forgotten feelings. A soft knock came at the door. Mom, come in, she said, quickly wiping her eyes. Ryan stepped in, his expression gentle. You okay? Of course, she said, forcing a smile. Just tired. He nodded, but didn't believe her. You've been quiet since last night. Did I say something wrong? Her heart softened instantly. No, sweetheart, you didn't. Sometimes things catch me off guard. Ryan took a small step closer, his voice low. I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable. He stopped, then said quietly, I just think you deserve more than loneliness. Emma's throat tightened again. That's very kind, Ryan, but you don't have to worry about me. I do worry, he said, his eyes steady on hers, because I see how strong you've been, and sometimes I wonder if being strong has kept you from letting someone love you again. The honesty in his tone made her heart ache. She didn't know what to say, so she looked away, afraid her emotions might spill over. He took another step forward, just close enough that she could feel the warmth from him. Ryan, she whispered, you're growing up into such a kind man. He smiled faintly. You made me that way. For a long second, They just stood there, the space between them filled with everything they couldn't say out loud. And then, before either of them could speak again, the power flickered, the lights went out, leaving the room in soft darkness, the only glow coming from the hallway lamp. Ryan exhaled, a quiet laugh breaking the tension. Guess it's just us and the storm again. Emma smiled faintly, her heart still racing. Seems like it. But neither of them could shake the feeling that something invisible had begun to change, slowly, deeply, and inevitably. The lights flickered once more, then stayed out completely. The storm had rolled back in, heavy and loud, rattling the windows as thunder grumbled across the sky. Ryan found a couple of candles and set them on the living room table, their small flames dancing in the dark, the room filled with a soft, golden glow, the same kind that made shadows look gentle and time feel slower. Emma wrapped herself in a blanket and sat on the couch, watching the rain trail down the window. Ryan joined her, his shoulders relaxed, a quiet smile tugging at his lips. Well, he said, looks like the universe wants us to talk instead of watch another movie. Emma chuckled softly. You always find meaning in everything. He shrugged. Maybe because everything does mean something, especially nights like this. For a few moments, they just listened, the hum of the rain, the steady crackle of candlelight, and the faint echo of wind against the roof. Ryan broke the silence first. Do you remember when we used to sit like this during power cuts? You'd tell me stories about your childhood, about how you'd dance in the rain. Emma smiled, eyes soft with memory. Yes, those were good days. Life was simpler then. You still dance sometimes? He asked quietly. She laughed. Dance? Oh please. I'm too old for that. Too old. He shook his head, smiling. You're younger in spirit than half the people I know. His words hung between them, warm and sincere. Emma felt a flutter of emotion, part pride, part something else she didn't want to name. The candlelight painted their faces in soft gold, and for a fleeting second, it felt like the world outside didn't exist. Ryan leaned back, his voice thoughtful. You know what's strange? When I was little, I thought you were unshakable, like nothing could ever hurt you. But now that I'm older, I realize how much you must have carried. Emma looked at him, her expression tender. We all carry things quietly, Ryan. It's part of growing up, and part of being human. He nodded, eyes glistening with something deeper than sadness. Sometimes I wish I'd been old enough to help you back then. Her heart softened. You did help me. You were the reason I kept going. He smiled faintly. And you're the reason I learned what love really means. Emma felt her breath catch, not because of the words themselves, but because of the way he said them. Gentle, meaningful, full of emotion he didn't try to hide. Ryan, she began, but her voice faltered. He turned to her, his tone soft but sure. You've given your whole life to making sure I never felt unloved. I just hope you know how much that means to me. Her eyes shimmered. Of course I do. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The world outside was lost to the rain, and the candles flicker-painted shadows that swayed like old memories. Then, out of nowhere, Ryan laughed softly. You're thinking too much again. Emma smiled, shaking her head. Maybe I am. I just don't want you to worry about me so much. I don't worry, he said, leaning forward slightly. I just care. There's a difference. That word care lingered in the air, deep, simple, but heavy with emotion. Emma tucked a strand of hair behind her ear and looked at him closely. The little boy who once clung to her during thunderstorms was now sitting across from her, grown, calm, and quietly protective. I don't even know how you grew up so fast, she murmured. He smiled. You blinked. That made her laugh, and for a moment, everything felt light again. But when her laughter faded, Ryan was still looking at her, not with the carefree eyes of a son joking with his mother, but with something gentler, heavier, and full of unspoken emotion. Mom, he said finally, his voice steady, I need to tell you something, and I don't want you to misunderstand it. Her smile faded a little. What is it? He hesitated, then took a slow breath. Last night, when I said I wish I could be the one to make you happy, I didn't mean it the wrong way. I just meant, he paused, searching for words. I see how beautiful your heart is, how much love you give, and I hate that the world hasn't given that back to you. It makes me want to protect you, even from your own loneliness. Emma's chest tightened again. His voice wasn't childish or impulsive. It was genuine, a kind of raw honesty that left her wordless. She looked down at her hands. Ryan, that's one of the kindest things anyone's ever said to me. He smiled softly. Good. Then it was worth saying. The thunder rolled again, and the candlelight trembled. Emma's heart was heavy but warm. full of something she hadn't felt in years: connection, appreciation, maybe even the soft ache of being seen. For a long while, they just sat there, two people bound by love that didn't fit into simple definitions. The lights finally blinked back on. Bright and sudden, Emma blinked, her thoughts scattering like dust in sunlight. Ryan exhaled, smiling. Guess the universe decided, we've talked enough for one night. She laughed, though her heart still raced quietly. Maybe it did. As she got up to blow out the candles, she could feel his gaze on her again, gentle, thoughtful, unspoken. And though neither said it aloud, both knew something had quietly shifted in their hearts. Something they couldn't quite name, but couldn't ignore either. The storm had passed by morning, leaving the world washed clean. Golden light spilled through the windows, glinting off raindrops that still clung to the glass. Emma stood by the sink, sipping her coffee, watching how the sunlight slowly warmed the house back to life. Last night's conversation still lingered in her mind, not the words exactly, but the feeling behind them. Ryan's honesty, his kindness, the way he'd spoken from his heart. It had touched something deep inside her. She hadn't realized how much she needed to hear that someone still believed she deserved happiness. When Ryan came into the kitchen, his easy smile filled the space like morning light. "You look better today," he said. Emma smiled. "I feel better. Maybe I just needed a good talk." He nodded, setting his mug on the counter. "You've always been there for me, Mom. Last night, I just wanted you to know, I see you too." Those words, "I see you," warmed her heart more than the coffee in her hands. They spent the morning cleaning up after the storm. Ryan fixed a few things in the yard, while Emma sorted through old photo boxes she hadn't opened in years. Each picture told a story: a birthday, a beach trip, a Christmas morning, and as she flipped through them, she felt both grateful and wistful. Life had moved fast. She'd spent so much time being strong that she'd forgotten what it felt like to be soft. That evening, as the sun began to set, Emma decided to take a walk. The neighborhood glowed in amber light, the kind that made everything look like a painting. She ended up near the small coffee shop down the street, the one she used to visit years ago with her husband. Back when everything still felt certain, she hesitated, then smiled and went inside. The smell of roasted beans and warm cinnamon filled the air. Behind the counter stood Mark, the owner, a man in his late 40s, with kind eyes and a voice that carried calm. "Emma," he said, surprised. "It's been ages." She laughed. "It has, hasn't it? I didn't think you'd remember me." "Of course I do," he said, smiling. "You used to come in every Thursday. Always ordered a caramel latte and a book recommendation." Emma chuckled. "Guilty." Mark made her drink just the way she liked it, and they sat by the window, talking about small things: the storm, the neighborhood, life. There was an ease between them that felt natural, like picking up a conversation that had only been paused. When she returned home later, Ryan noticed the glow on her face. "You look happy," he said with a teasing smile. Emma blushed slightly. "I stopped by the coffee shop, caught up with Mark." Ryan grinned. "The one who always gave me extra cookies when I was a kid." "That's the one." He nodded approvingly. "Good, you should go out more, Mom. You've been taking care of everyone else for too long. It's time someone takes care of you." His words were simple, but they hit her heart with quiet truth. Over the next few days, Emma found herself visiting the coffee shop more often, sometimes with Ryan, sometimes alone. Mark was always there, ready with a story or a smile that made her forget the weight of the years she'd carried. One afternoon, as they sat outside watching the sunset, Mark looked at her and said gently, "You know, Emma, storms don't always come to destroy things. Sometimes they just clear the air." She smiled at that, really smiled, realizing how true it was. The storm had come, the lights had gone out, and in that darkness, something inside her had quietly awakened. That night, as she came home, Ryan was waiting on the porch, camera in hand. The storm had passed by morning, leaving the world washed clean. Golden light spilled through the windows, glinting off raindrops that still clung to the glass. Emma stood by the sink, sipping her coffee, watching how the sunlight slowly warmed the house back to life. Last night's conversation still lingered in her mind, not the words exactly, but the feeling behind them. Ryan's honesty, his kindness, the way he'd spoken from his heart. It had touched something deep inside her. She hadn't realized how much she needed to hear that someone still believed she deserved happiness. When Ryan came into the kitchen, his easy smile filled the space like morning light. "You look better today," he said. Emma smiled. "I feel better. Maybe I just needed a good talk." He nodded, setting his mug on the counter. You've always been there for me, Mom. Last night, I just wanted you to know, I see you too. Those words, I see you, warmed her heart more than the coffee in her hands. They spent the morning cleaning up after the storm. Ryan fixed a few things in the yard, while Emma sorted through old photo boxes she hadn't opened in years. Each picture told a story, a birthday, a beach trip, a Christmas morning, and as she flipped through them, she felt both grateful and wistful. Life had moved fast. She'd spent so much time being strong that she'd forgotten what it felt like to be soft. That evening, as the sun began to set, Emma decided to take a walk. The neighborhood glowed in amber light, the kind that made everything look like a painting. She ended up near the small coffee shop down the street, the one she used to visit years ago with her husband, back when everything still felt certain. She hesitated, then smiled and went inside. The smell of roasted beans and warm cinnamon filled the air. Behind the counter stood Mark, the owner, a man in his late 40s, with kind eyes and a voice that carried calm. "Emma," he said, surprised. "It's been ages." She laughed. "It has, hasn't it? I didn't think you'd remember me." "Of course I do," he said, smiling. "You used to come in every Thursday, always ordered a caramel latte and a book recommendation." Emma chuckled, guilty. Mark made her drink just the way she liked it, and they sat by the window, talking about small things, the storm, the neighborhood, life. There was an ease between them that felt natural, like picking up a conversation that had only been paused. When she returned home later, Ryan noticed the glow on her face. "You look happy," he said with a teasing smile. Emma blushed slightly. "I stopped by the coffee shop. Caught up with Mark." Ryan grinned. "The one who always gave me extra cookies when I was a kid. That's the one." He nodded approvingly. "Good. You should go out more, Mom. You've been taking care of everyone else for too long. It's time someone takes care of you." His words were simple, but they hit her heart with quiet truth. Over the next few days, Emma found herself visiting the coffee shop more often, sometimes with Ryan, sometimes alone. Mark was always there, ready with a story or a smile that made her forget the weight of the years she'd carried. One afternoon, as they sat outside watching the sunset, Mark looked at her and said gently, "You know, Emma, storms don't always come to destroy things. Sometimes they just clear the air." She smiled at that, really smiled, realizing how true it was. The storm had come. The lights had gone out. And in that darkness, something inside her had quietly awakened. That night, as she came home, Ryan was waiting on the porch, camera in hand. "Hey," he said, showing her the screen. "Look what I caught." It was a picture of her standing by the coffee shop window, her face lit by the warm glow inside. She looked peaceful, content, maybe even a little radiant. Emma's eyes softened. "You took this?" "Yeah," he said, smiling. "It's for my project. I wanted to capture what love looks like, and that's what I saw." Her heart melted. "Oh, Ryan," he shrugged shyly. "Told you? Real love doesn't always look like the movies. Sometimes it's just someone finding their smile again." Emma felt tears prick her eyes, not from sadness, but gratitude. Maybe love didn't always come the way she once imagined. Maybe it came through kindness, through second chances, through moments that felt quiet but real. And as the night fell softly over their little house, she realized the truth. Ryan hadn't just reminded her of love, he had helped her open her heart to it again. The next few weeks drifted by in a way that felt new, still balanced, quietly hopeful. Emma noticed she woke each morning lighter than before. The shadows that used to cling to her thoughts had thinned, replaced by small, golden moments. Laughter with Ryan over breakfast, the comforting aroma of coffee from the shop down the street, and a steady rhythm that felt a lot like peace. Mark had quickly become part of that rhythm. Sometimes he'd stop by after closing the cafe, bringing leftover pastries or new blends for Emma to try. Other times they'd walk along the pier and talk about ordinary things, work, memories, favorite movies, and dreams they thought they'd forgotten to chase. One Saturday evening, Ryan joined them at the coffee shop. He sat across from his mom and Mark, camera hanging from his shoulder, quietly taking photos while pretending not to. The light from the window touched Emma's face, and he smiled behind the lens. "Perfect," he said softly. "You look happy, Mom." Emma blushed a little, laughing. "That's because I am." Mark smiled at her words, his hand resting on the table near hers, not touching, just there, close enough to feel like a promise. Later, as they walked home together, Ryan nudged her playfully. "So," he teased, "should I start calling him Mr. Coffee?" Emma laughed. "Oh, stop, we're just friends." "Friends," he said, grinning. "That's how all good stories start." She shook her head but couldn't stop smiling. Ryan's teasing didn't bother her. It only made her realize how much had changed. He wasn't protecting her anymore, he was rooting for her. A week later, Ryan's college hosted an exhibition for his photography class. The theme, What Love Looks Like. The room buzzed with quiet conversation and the faint hum of soft music. On one wall hung Ryan's photograph sonnets, simple and deeply human. Among them was the picture he'd taken of Emma at the coffee shop window, her smile glowing through the glass. Beneath it, he'd written a caption in neat letters, "Love is when someone finds their light again." Emma stood in front of it, tears blurring her eyes. She felt a hand on her shoulder, Mark's gentle touch, and when she turned, Ryan was smiling at her from across the room. In that single glance, she understood everything. All those nights of quiet conversations, all the storms they'd weathered, all the lessons about loss and strength that had all led here, not to some dramatic ending, but to a peaceful new beginning. When the exhibition ended, they stepped outside into the cool night. The city lights shimmered on the wet pavement, and the air smelled of rain. "Ryan," Emma said softly, "you have no idea how proud I am of you." He smiled. "I learned from the best." She reached up to brush a tear from her cheek. "You gave me back something I didn't even realize I'd lost." He hugged her tightly. "You just needed someone to remind you it was still there." Mark watched from a few steps away, smiling quietly. When Ryan pulled back, he nodded toward him. "Go on, Mom, I'll wait by the car." Emma walked over to Mark. For a moment, neither spoke. Then she said, almost in a whisper, "You know, I wasn't planning on letting anyone in again." Mark's eyes softened. "Sometimes plans change when life starts smiling at you." She laughed gently. Feeling warmth bloom in her chest, they stood there for a long moment under the streetlights, the sound of the city around them, a world moving forward, just as they were. For the first time in years, Emma didn't feel alone. She didn't feel like someone's past or someone's responsibility. She felt like herself again, a woman capable of feeling love, hope, and joy. Ryan called out from the car, "Hey, you two coming? Or should I start another Netflix movie without you?" Emma and Mark laughed, sharing a knowing glance before walking hand in hand toward the car. And as the city lights shimmered above them, Emma thought back to that rainy night, the one that started it all. They were just watching a Netflix movie, but her son had said something that changed everything. "You deserve someone who makes you happy." He was right, and now, finally, she was. The end.